It's Micah from Micah Doodles. Kind of be drawing a Lamborghini today. So on this phone, I'm using my son's phone here to kind of give you an idea of what I'm going to be drawing so you can see. I've sketched it out. Basically it's like this, and so I've kind of Micah Doodle styled it. You can see right here. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you guys a marker rendition of how I would do this. So before I start, I've kind of picked out some colors that I think are going to work well with this. PM16. So when I do my drawings, I pencil them out. After I'm all done, then I'll take an eraser and I'll go over it and kind of lighten up my lines a little bit still, so I can still see it, but enough where I can kind of get my details and at least see what I'm doing. So the first thing I do, I've also got a bunch of grays, some cool grays, some dark grays, or some cool grays and some French grays in there and some warm grays. And I use those colors really to kind of balance things out. You guys can kind of get an idea as I'm doing this. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to basically start, how I always start is I take black pens and I use those as my starting point. So everything dark on this car, I'm going to basically hit with black right away. And so that would include the wheels and the tires. So right now I'm going to just basically put the horizon line here of what this car is driving on, like this, so I can get an idea. Okay, then I'm going to basically go in and start darkening everything in. Okay, everything that I know that's dark. Okay, so microphone's on. Sorry guys, I can't answer any questions because I'm not staring at my phone. But you guys will kind of get an idea. This is just going to be really rough, but it'll give you an idea kind of what I'm doing here. Let's see here. Darkening this stuff in here. Hopefully this is going to be okay. We can see that. Okay. 1, 2, 3. In the edge of my tires here, I actually decided to put new rims on this Lamborghini that weren't on the original, just because these rims I can do are faster than if I had to actually follow the rims on the car that were there. A little more detail. But for this quick sketch, I just wanted to kind of give you guys an idea of kind of how to do what I'm inking, the inking process. So again, I'm doing it kind of cartoon form. So this is kind of my style that I like to do when I do stuff like that. I kind of oversize my tires, things like that. Okay. I also have a tendency to put the tire treads on the car, so this is basically how I'm going to ink it out like this. I'm going to basically create my outline shape of my car here. As soon as I know what that looks like, I'm going to begin to then ink that in. So I've got my basic shape of my car here. Hey Jaden, can you turn your phone on again for me? Okay, so now I'm taking my basic shape of my car, which I have here, and I'm going to outline it with a Sharpie marker here. Now this is going to give me the parameters of the way that this car looks. Hopefully you guys can see that okay. Now this is kind of fun. I always have a tendency to outline my vehicles. It just makes them stand out a little bit more. So when I'm drawing, just everything that's going to be within the outline, basically that's basically what I'm going to be drawing. So that's kind of like a cartoon style. And now I'm done. So as soon as I'm finished with this, I can either choose to, I've got a couple other colors I use. A lot of times I'll either go for the windows. I've got 2 of these colors right here that I like to use. I use these also for chrome. I also use 114 if I'm doing chrome as well. So on this, I'll do a real quick, I'm going to give these rims chrome, and so I'm going to kind of show you what I would do when I'm starting this thing up. And so, let me show you this. So a lot of times from the windows, I like to basically sketch this down like that. So I'm pulling it from one side to the other. kind of real basic and simple. This window goes all the way down, and these pens, basically you can blend them and whatnot, stuff like that. So that's kind of what I'm going to do. Same thing with the lights. I know I'm going to add to these lights later, so I'm just basically doctoring them up really loose, really rough, but it's enough to get me some highlights in there. On these rims, I'm going to give them a chrome lip, so I'm going to take my light blue and I'm going to basically draw in my outline parts here. Same thing. Again, it's really rough. Okay. When I go into detail it in later, I'll show you exactly what I'm doing. So it kind of gives you the basic idea here. Now, for this car, on this one, there's a lot of shapes and a lot of different edges, and so a lot of times what I do is I will edge the whole, or I will color the whole thing in orange, and then I'll go back and add the highlights. And so for this part, I'm just going to do that. I'm going to walk it through and begin to start dialing everything in here, just to give you guys an idea. Now again, when I'm laying down color, I'm not laying it down super accurate, because I know that this is my first layer and I'm going to go back over it, but I do want to find where my edges are. So sometimes I'll leave a break where I know there's an edge, because I'm going to go back over and I'm going to hit it again. So right now I'm using PM116. Okay, I know that here there's a darker spot like that. I'm going to have a highlight that's going to run down here like this. I know there's a line that goes like that, so I'm just kind of basically charting my territory as I'm laying this color out real fast. And then again, as soon as I basically lay it out, then I'll know where things go, and I can begin to add some darkness in there and begin to shape it up and things like that. So I think the fun part of just doing this is, you know, just having fun and be creative with it. You know, don't be afraid to try new things. I mean, for me, sometimes I've had to make a mistake on a vehicle to come up with an idea of how to do something different. And so don't be afraid to make mistakes. And again, you just want to have fun when you do that as well. So I'm just kind of blocking out my areas right now where I know that this car So it looks pretty rough. It looks pretty, I don't know, unsophisticated, or it looks just kind of like sloppy. But I think this is real important. I like to lay down my base color first to get an idea of what I'm doing here. First, then I'll go back and I'll start fine tuning it and adding some things and making it a little bit more realistic. But for right now, I just wanted to kind of get the idea, the base idea, laid down, so you can kind of see what's going on here. Hopefully, guys, this helps. I mean, and everybody does styles a little bit differently, but this is just basically the style that I learned just from drawing stuff on my own and just kind of enjoying just the whole process. And I think that's the important thing. You got to enjoy what you do. Okay, switching over now to a 114 gray. So I'm going to add in some lines in here. I know that those are going to touch in here as well. I've also got some black shading that are some bent things are like that. This goes like this here. Okay. Now within my lights, I've got some fun things going on. So anytime you're going to add dark, you're really going to start kind of adding some depth and some dimension to those lights. And so again, laying it down very, very sloppy, but still enough to kind of get a basic outline of what's going on. Okay. Now, when I do my rims, since these are going to be chrome rims, I'm going to kind of give an idea. I'm going to add in, anytime you do chrome, you've got a horizon line. On your horizon line, below the horizon line is going to be reflection of your ground and things like that. Above the horizon line has a tendency to be blue. It reflects the sky, and also white. So what I'm doing is I'm going to put in a couple things here. First, let me add in this little air dam here real quick. There's that up. Sometimes I don't add my strongest blacks till later, because if you have a tendency to mess up, you can go over it and do it with the blacks. But if you are pretty confident with it, then that's where it's going. Nothing's going to change. So, and I haven't done this one before, so I'm just basically popping it in and showing you kind of where it's at so that you can get this thing down, get it done, kind of show you what we're doing here. No, this guy pulls in here like this. So, there we go. Okay, got it. Okay, again, on this car, I'm just going to do the windows here real quick just to kind of throw in some color, some texture. I'm not really being super precise, but I know that this is where things are happening. This is where things go. I've also got a vent back here that I'm going to put in as well. Okay. So this goes like that. Now this is kind of hidden below the shadow, but I use 114 a lot as a shadow because it looks like it goes on darker, but it actually lightens up a lot. So on this one, I'm just going to add it on to kind of show what's going on here on that fin. Okay, now on these rims, I am going to actually turn them into, I'm going to use orange on them just to kind of add something a little bit different. And so I know that I've got my center of my hub here. So I'm going to basically add that here. Okay, and I kind of want to do little spike things that come out like this. So I'm going to add those like that. Now again, everything's real rough. I haven't fine-tuned anything. I haven't darkened anything up. I haven't, really kind of defined the areas on there. But it gives me a rough idea where my highlights are and the areas that I want to go back over and kind of look at. Okay, now taking my 114, actually take a lighter color. Let's see if I got a 102. Take a 102 and I'm going to gray in the inside of the car area, just where I know my shadows are going to be. Inside here, inside here as well. This is where I can start kind of fine-tuning some of my lights as well, adding some details. Taking a lighter gray now. This is a gray, this is a 102. Adding those, okay. So, my light source is basically coming this way, hitting a couple spots on the car which are pretty predominant. And so what I want to do is I want to add that in. Let me see here. Okay, so I'm not taking my main pen to this yet, or my my outline pen, my Sharpie marker, because I'm still basically adding stuff and darkening it up. So now that I've kind of laid down this color, kind of got an idea where my highlights are going to go, I'm going to go over it again and I'm going to begin to darken up some of those areas so that I want them to stand out a little bit more. You see, you start laying on this color, it comes a little darker. This is going to make this side of the car pop out and stand out from the other side. And again, sometimes I have a tendency not to touch this side of the car or this side of the wheel, but on this one I'm going to do it because what I have a tendency to, I have a white pen that I'm going to go back over and I'm going to highlight that, and it'll make this wheel really pop out from that color. Typically, if you draw a wheel and the color of your car is very similar, you want to have a white line that you can use to distinguish or make that wheel pop out from the background, so at least it stands out a little bit more. But on this one, the color's pretty light, so naturally it's going to do that. Yeah.
I think I flopped it down something. What? Let me see.
Now on this side of the Lamborghini is going to be kind of darker, and then the underside of here is going to be pretty much the darkest. And so sometimes what I do is I will go over it with a gray over this color, or I'll just build up these colors to make them really, really pop, or I'll use a different color altogether, a different color orange, to make these things stand out a little bit more as well. Okay. Now you can kind of see it's starting to take shape, starting to build itself up a little bit. And then again, it's just, so a lot of times it's just layering, kind of layering it, building it up, layering it, building up, layering it, building up. So I'm going to try something different. Normally I don't do this, but I'm going to give it a shot just for the sake of doing it. And this is where you make it or break it with this. A lot of times I typically stick with the same color, but on this one I'm gonna branch off that, and I'm actually going to go into the gray fields, and I'm going to start hitting the colors that I want to really make a difference in gray. So just so that you guys can see what's going on. And I'm going to take a 109 color, just add a little bit darker, but it's going to really define the dimensions of the car. See that? Those shadows really add a lot of distinction between where everything's at right now. Okay. Let's see here. This goes like that. Okay, now since on these rims what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of make them, tailor them so that they hit, there's a hard spot there where they're actually going to hit on the inside of the surface of the rim. So that's going to be a hard outline for me there. It's just going to tell me where that part of the rim is. Then what I have a tendency to do is I go back as I have my kind of outline of the inside of the rim, and I have a tendency to hit that with a highlight there, or darken that up, because as soon as I add the black, that's going to make that whole thing, everything on that rim, pop forward. Okay, so I'm not worried about detail now, but I am worried about placement, and so I really want to make sure that this line is a kind of a continual line like that, because I'm going to go over it, and I can always add that detail later. So some people like to draw calipers in there. I'm not really that type of person. I just like to kind of, get the idea of what's going on and then basically kind of build it, but make it look realistic without having to really just commit to that. So again, quick sketches. This is how I do it. Now you might take your time. That's totally fine. But the goal is you just want to have fun with it. Okay, again, I'm taking this 109 marker here, PM 109 gray, and I'm going to again hit some areas so that I can get some depth here and get some shadows going on here as well. Okay. Okay. Things going on here. Now on these ones, kind of fun is then you can begin to add some shadows to wherever this thing is hitting on these, and everything's just really rough here because I know what's going to happen is my line. I'm going to kick a little bit of a line over the top, and also every time on my shadow, I always throw a cast shadow on my rim. So for me, that's just my style. I always like to cast my shadow. I go dark up here and then I bring it down to a point like this. Just kind of adds a little bit of depth, kind of shows that the wheel's tucked in there a little bit like that. Okay, so roughly that's kind of how things are looking so far. Then I can go back and you can add little you know, highlights in there and things like that in your lights to kind of make it come alive and whatnot. But fairly, I mean, it's pretty sloppy right now, but yet you kind of get the idea, and that's okay. Okay, that's there. That's there. I'm gonna take my light gray. Anywhere where I have a, you know, a wheel or something like that, I'm gonna darken that thing up. Shoot that thing up like that. Okay. 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 There we go. So basically, that's kind of a rough so far. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of start cleaning up my lines. Wherever those orange lines met, I'm going to really kind of start defining them. This is kind of like the third layer of this basically car. Defining all this stuff in there right now. I'm going to cover up some of the lines that I went in because I know where they are now. I've got enough color down to kind of give me some distinction where my lines are, which will help me when I go back over and trace it with another color. Go. It's funny, my son took off with the phone, so now I don't have my my car anymore. So I'm just going to go from memory here, but I probably have enough to kind of figure out what I'm doing here, roughly. We'll see. So on these cars, it's kind of fun because you got all these angles and these points. So you really, when I do cartooning, I kind of like to over-exaggerate some of those, so it really just kind of makes it stand out. Also, I put it a little bit on a stanced hill because I think that just adds a lot to it. So and it shows motion leaning into the hill as well. So. Okay, so now comes the part where I've kind of basically defined it. I've kind of thrown down enough color to kind of get an idea of where everything's at. Now I'm going to basically go back and I'm going to just start inking this thing. I'm going to kind of start taking over and starting to really kind of define it here. Now I will use some of these white highlights as reference points, but I kind of have an idea of where things are going from here. So. I don't think I'm gonna need anything else. I think I should be okay. Okay, so now what I do is I take my I typically use a Sharpie. Let's make sure we're okay. Yeah, use a Sharpie pen like this, and I begin to kind of define elements of the car. And again, this is just my style. Take what you want from it, learn from it. You know, develop your own style as well. But really, it's just a learning game. You just want to have fun with that. Same thing with this. I'm going to put this at where this is at. So these black lines kind of are detail lines. This is where you're going to start seeing your drawing come alive as well, because anytime you're going to add black, it's really going to define the shape of what's going on with your vehicle. Okay. And my son took my reference photo, so I'm just going from memory here on these lights, so it's probably not as best, not like I totally want it, but it's enough to kind of give you guys an idea of kind of what's going on. So, and again, you know, I like to kind of quick sketch and throw things out. This guy points to here like this. Now this hood is going to be bent or it comes to a point, so you really kind of want to accent that a little bit. You know, you don't want to just draw a straight line over it. So I kind of overemphasize sometimes my lines there in my hood, and I know that that hits that light right there. So that was my thoughts on that. Yeah, this car's got so many angles and lines on it. It's kind of fun to draw because it allows you to see things a little bit clearer sometimes. This guy comes down to a point like this. This one is like that. Hopefully you guys can see that okay. My hand's not in the way because I'm not really staring at my camera. Now on this, we want to roll these things. This is where you can clean things up in here as well. Again, when I go over on my white highlights, I'll really clean this stuff up because then that's really going to define the parameters of where something is. But I kind of want to get the basic shape going inside there, so that way when I go in there and detail it up with the highlights, it's the last thing you'll be able to kind of see what's taking place. Again, this Sharpie line is basically going to really kind of help to define the details of where things are. I know that kind of goes like that back there, so I just want to pull it in like this. This is kind of unfair because I don't have my reference photo anymore, so sorry guys. Okay, so that's roughly kind of what I've got, and I've got a logo up here somewhere, but I can't remember exactly how it looks. Let's see here. This should be pretty good. All right, so that's my highlights. For the back. Okay, now I'm going to go in and I'm going to start tackling these wheels here. I have a tendency, I like to really, I like to put tread on my wheels. That's just my style. So I kind of put my tread on like that. Okay, kind of basic, kind of simple. Now I'm going to go through and start doing my, adding the details for what's going on inside here. Again, I'm just kind of making it up as I'm going here. I don't think I've ever seen these type of rims on a Lamborghini before, but just for the sake of getting it done and presenting it to you guys and showing you kind of what I was thinking, I'm just doing it this way. Now really, rims aren't my specialty. There's so many other people who are so much better than me, but let's at least give you guys an idea. There's a lot of super talented artists out there on Instagram who seriously rock it, and anytime you guys get an opportunity just to go on there and learn from them, do it. You know, I'm always learning. I'm learning stuff as I'm on there and drawing and stuff like that. But anything that I can help teach, man, I'm all about that. I want to see you guys succeed at what you do. so it's kind of rough. So it looks like this 114 to me. It didn't go as dark as I wanted to, so I'm going to hit with a PM 116. This PM 116 is going to really add more depth to my shadow here. Kind of make it more stand out, kind of make it a little darker. These colors have a tendency to go on darker and they dry a little lighter. So you know, it looks sometimes it may seem like, oh my gosh, I went too dark, but you know what? It just comes with practice, and you kind of get an idea of some of these colors and how dark they will go. And what's also good too is if you have a sketch pad, put that sketch pad next to your or practice laying down laying down ink colors next to like a piece of paper that you can kind of mark it out, because then sometimes it's cool because the pen cap kind of tells you what it's going to look like when it's dried, but sometimes it doesn't look that color when it goes on, and it's easy to go, oh man, I just messed that one up. But just give it some time and watch. The colors will begin to kind of be exactly what they look like on that cap. So just let it dry. But again, if you go over and over and over again, it's going to go a little bit darker than actually what's there. But this will kind of give a rough idea. Hopefully that helps. Now, one of the tough things about after I ink it, typically I don't do this. Typically I don't go in and ink a drawing after I've laid down my pen, because what happens, it has a tendency to bleed on this type of pen. There are other types of pens out there that won't do that, but the pens that I use, the Sharpie markers especially, can give little bleed lines if you're not careful. So that's typically I always do that kind of last. So now I'm going to kind of go in and add a couple darker highlights on here to kind of make this thing pop a little bit more. Again, that looks really dark, but don't worry about it. Hopefully you guys can see that I'm not blocking your view. Okay. Again, this 114 is pretty dark, so this is really going to kind of define a lot of the things. If I went really hard in here, I would probably lose some of my detail, but that's okay. Gives you guys a rough idea. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to go dark in here and see what happens. So you can't be afraid to mess up. You just got to go for it. If you're worried sometimes about laying down ink in a drawing, you've already done it, it looks good, you like it, but then you're worried about the ink, because there's no undo when you're doing that. I just encourage you to make a photocopy of that car before you start, and that way if you have any issues, you can do right over the top of that photocopy. You can begin to ink it, because if you ever messed up, you can always go back. But for this purpose, there's no going back, there's no undo on this one, so it is what it is. So at least you guys are going to kind of see it. So if I mess up, hey, you know, that's just part of the game. But hopefully it looks starting to come together. Hopefully it looks okay. All right, now I'm going to start adding my highlights and my details to this car. So with this type of pen, this is a Molotow pen. It's like a kind of a paint marker, an ink marker. I'm going to lay that one down. Okay, now I'm going to hit the areas in the highlights where I just hit on here to kind of walk this guy through. Let me get some more. There we go. Now these are fun because you can really go to town on these highlights as well. So typically I want to hit my lines here, here. Now again, I don't have any reference thing anymore. My son took my image picture that I was using. And this is kind of a fun trick right here. When you have a dark and a light, take your white pen and go over, go just underneath where your line is, just to define it. Sometimes that actually helps bring that edge out on that image. Or if you have a lip or an edge on something that you really want to stand out, just basically stroke it right there with a little bit of an outline, a little white highlight, and it'll really kind of make that thing pop like that. And I know that it's like that. I have a tendency sometimes just to kind of guess where light's hitting. I may put a couple dots. I may do these little hard dots like this, which kind of add fun to it. Sometimes I put a little starburst on there as well. Go. Now inside here, I gotta really kind of define what's going on here, because this looks really dark. So sometimes you just want to go over with your white pen to kind of make all this stuff pop. Same thing on this back fin here. I have my light source, and I really want to make sure that you can see where it changes dimension here. And obviously this goes over the top here. And then with my rims, to define this, I'm actually going to trace this with a white pen in here, which what happens is this kind of, even though I'm not tracing my black line, I'm just to the right of it, but it actually adds a little bit of depth to it. And this is what I do with that. So I'll go up here, basically trace that white line like that. And then let me show you something. This is what I was talking about with that white pen. To really make your wheel stand out, I have a tendency to trace the outside of the wheel with the white pen like this all the way down to its spot. Now what that does is that actually pops that wheel out, makes it stand forward. All right. Again, the wheel kind of gets lost here as well. I'm going to trace the outline of this a little bit just to add a little bit of rim texture in there. Then I'm going to take my tread, kind of put where that tread would go like that. So now that tire, basically like that, kind of makes that tire pop out. And even what you can do, if you wanted to kind of make some of this stuff stand out, is go back through and I have a tendency sometimes when I'm doing a vehicle on a hill or a slope, I'll trace the slope right at the base of where this is, because what it does is it kind of defines it for you. And if you wanted to, you could kind of trace out here and draw the lines and things like that. But now that I've basically got this vehicle, and again, I'm taking my white pen and I'm going inside of where the black is. I'm not tracing the black right on top, but I'm going a little bit to the left of it, which kind of it adds a little bit of dimension, a little bit of back highlight to it, which kind of makes your rim pop out a little bit more. Again, I'm going to hit the highlights of where the tops of these fins are on this rim to kind of allow it to go. Now again, if I'm going to add some highlights and details, I'll just do dots. Have a tendency on the edge is where these sparklers are going to be for light sources or for sun glares or things like that. And anytime that you darken something up, I'll give you an example here. I'll take my 114 and I'll darken my rim up pretty heavy right here. Okay, darken the bottoms of it up right here. Same thing with this. Now, if I'm going to add, when I add one of these white dots on top, it's really going to stand out on that dark background. If you do it on a white surface, you can't see it, but if you do it on a dark surface, it really stands out. So then you can actually kind of have fun, take a thinner one, and begin to add a little bit of sparkles, and your sparkles or your sun glares will really begin to stand out, because it's on that darker surface. Anyway, just kind of some ideas like that. Again, let me define this real quick. Put some of this in there so I can kind of see what's going on here. Okay, and then So roughly, we're about done. Real simply. Typically on my drawings, what I like to do, I kind of always like to throw a steering wheel in there. Just kind of a cartoon steering wheel. You know, just to add, that's kind of my own little style I like to do, and then I kind of highlight it as well. Something like this. So, anyway, but that's, oh, let me get this guy here so we know what's going on. Now again, I'm drawing some of this from memory because my son took my phone, so I'm hoping this is probably somewhat close. Again, and this is, you can trace that. If I know that that's where the highlight of my car is, I can kind of go through and hit it with this. Kind of add some detail, some shine on there as well. Make things kind of stand out. So roughly, that's kind of, I guess I'll call it good. But that kind of give you guys an idea so far what I like to do. And obviously, when you're done, you want to sign your artwork. So, and there you have it, Lamborghini. If you have any questions, feel free. Check me out at micadoodles.com. Mica, M-I-C-A-H-D-O-O-D-L-E-S.com. You can see some more of my art.